the Rambler Network.
Welcome to season 4 of Casablanca. We're starting things off with A Hard Day's Night, which it was the Beatles' first feature film. It was directed by Richard Lester, and it was written by Alun Owen, and starring John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, otherwise known as the Beatles. Now, when you hear Beatles movie, you might expect some cheesy cash grab musical with just enough plot to hang a few songs on. And honestly, that's kind of how this whole thing started. But what we got instead was one of the most unexpectedly innovative, influential, and just plain fun films of the decade. Early in 1964, the Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, have already taken the UK by storm. They've topped the charts, packed out concerts, and caused traffic jams with screaming fans. Then came the Ed Sullivan Show. Overnight, America was hooked. Beatlemania went global. The band was under pressure to strike while the iron was molten. So their manager, Brian Epstein, locked in a 3-movie deal to capitalize on the craze. But here's the twist. A Hard Day's Night, their first film, wasn't given to just anyone. It landed in the hands of Richard Lester, an American-born director working in the UK, known for his work on experimental comedy with the Goon Show's Peter Sellers and Spike Mulligan. And that's where the magic begins. Lester didn't want to make a typical musical. He wanted something new, fast, and real. So instead of building a fake story around the Beatles, he leaned into their real lives, the madness of being young, famous, and constantly on the move. Enter screenwriter Alun Owen, who followed the Beatles around for a few days and then wrote a script based on their actual personalities and interactions. That's why the film feels so natural, because, in a way, it is. The film follows the band over a roughly 36-hour period as they prepare for a live TV performance. They're chased by fans, trapped in trains, dodging the press, getting into mischief, and occasionally getting some music in. Each Beatle has his own moment to shine, his own little arc. John is the sardonic prankster, always quick with a deadpan line, always a little too clever for the room. There's a moment where someone asks him if he's a rocker, and he replies, "I'm a mocker." Classic John. There's even a scene where he convinces someone he isn't who he is. At first, she says he looks like him, but by the end of the scene, she's saying, "You don't even look like him." Paul McCartney ends up in a bit of a sitcom setup with his clean grandfather, played by Wilfred Brambell, who, fun fact, was famous at the time for playing a dirty old man on TV, which made the whole "he's very clean" joke even funnier to audiences then. George Harrison stumbles into a fashion marketing office and ends up roasting a line of trendy shirts, accidentally turning into a kind of media critic in the process. It's low-key hilarious and a sharp dig at how marketing was already trying to cash in on youth culture. It's even funnier when you remember that George was considered the quiet one. And Ringo Starr? He's the heart of the film. He goes off on his own to find some peace, leading to a silent, melancholy stretch that almost feels like a short film within the film. He wanders into canals, tries to be helpful, ends up in jail. It's Charlie Chaplin-esque, and it's utterly moving. But the real secret sauce of A Hard Day's Night is how it looks. The camera work is revolutionary. Director Richard Lester took inspiration from the French New Wave. So we get handheld shots, canted angles, quick cuts, and spontaneous feeling moments. There's one moment where the Beatles break into Can't Buy Me Love and run wild in an open field. It's joyful, chaotic, and totally unscripted. That scene alone has been called the birth of the modern music video. Behind the scenes, cinematographer Gilbert Taylor, who would later shoot Doctor Strangelove and Star Wars, gave the film a crisp, almost documentary-like feel. The whole thing was shot in just 7 weeks on a tight budget. The Beatles were new to acting, so Lester would sometimes keep cameras rolling without telling them, capturing more natural reactions. That authenticity shows. And speaking of behind the scenes, fun fact, the title A Hard Day's Night came from one of Ringo's classic Ringoisms. He came back from a long day of filming and said, "It's been a hard day's night." Everyone laughed and then thought, wait, that's perfect. So they wrote a song in one night, and it became the film's iconic opening number. Despite its unconventional approach, A Hard Day's Night was a hit. Critics loved it, audiences loved it. It helped legitimize the Beatles not just as musicians, but as full-on cultural icons. And the impact? Huge. It paved the way for MTV, influenced filmmakers from Martin Scorsese to Wes Anderson, and proved that pop culture and art cinema could collide in beautiful ways. So, final thoughts? A Hard Day's Night isn't just a Beatles movie. It's a lightning in a bottle moment. A film that captures the chaos, charm, and charisma of the world's most famous band as they were about to change everything. It's funny, smart, and stylish, and still cool 60 years later. The film is streaming on Max, but I bought the Crichton Collection Blu-ray, which is packed with special features and feature rides and documentaries. So I highly recommend getting that. But if you don't want to buy that, like I said, it is streaming on Max. And I do highly recommend it. And cut.
The Rambler Network.